Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by the Union Capital Corporation and Natel's Air Conditioning and Heating, a proud sponsor of the St. Jude Dream Home.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher, and over the next hour, we're going to talk New Orleans sports. We'll talk about the Saints, LSU, Tulane, and, of course, the New Orleans Pelicans. Joining me on the show tonight, return visits for both gentlemen, Jeff Duncan of the New Orleans Times-Picayune and NOLA.com, and Sean Fazende of Fox 8 Sports. And, guys, thanks so much for coming down again. Really appreciate you guys joining me.
Glad to be here. Our pleasure.
Jeff, first of all, please tell the folks a little bit about NOLA.com. You're, of course, you're a columnist there, what you're doing online and what you're doing for the paper as well.
Well, we're pretty much all in with the Saints right now. Like I'm sure Sean feels the same way. I mean, there's so much to cover. Everybody's spread thin, but the Saints having this remarkable season, I think, is our number one priority. And so we're getting ready to go to St. Louis. Got about 5 of us heading up there.
You got the Daily Duncan going too, don't you?
Yeah, daily, having fun with that.
Right.
Doing a little video work.
Right.
A little rough around the edges, but, we're getting there.
Yeah, that's great. I enjoy it. Tell you, I really do. Sean, Fox 8, wall-to-wall Saints, my friend.
We are all in with the New Orleans Saints right now. We have our Saints Game Plan show, which actually airs tonight, Thursday night, 10:30. We have our 4, 5, 9, and 10 sportscast. We have our Fox 8 live tailgate from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Sunday. The final play every Sunday night at 10:30, where we wrap it all up. Every now and then I make an appearance on NOLA.com with, I believe it's called Black and Gold Today.
Right,
yeah,
with
Rachel Whitaker. So I'm there sometimes as well, and but really all in with Saints right now, and it's a fun year to be a Saints reporter.
Let's not forget about your award-winning blog. Please tell them about that.
After Further Review, it's on fox8live.com. It's called the After Further Review blog. Touch on Saints, really anything local sports. Obviously right now heavy Saints content, but fox8live.com.
Guys, and Jeff, I'll start with you. Drew Brees has had a remarkable career here in New Orleans. Again, the fastest to 50,000 yards in the history of the NFL. What is it, 6 seasons now with 30 or more touchdowns? Talk a little about Brees and just, I mean, he could have been, it's so funny how this thing could have worked out. He could have been in Miami. Saban would have been in Miami. There would have been a different scenario for LSU, rather. And now you're looking at, obviously, this guy has really catapulted this franchise into a championship caliber team. Yeah,
and I think to some degree he's still a little underrated nationally. He's never won an MVP award. It looks like Peyton Manning's going to win his 5th this year. Drew Brees is one of the few quarterbacks that ever has had a bunch of seasons with 107 quarterback rating. That's kind of the magic number. Usually when you get to that number, you win the award every year. He's never won, and he's done it 4 times. And he's going to do it probably again this year. He's right on the cusp. But I think more than that, though, it's his leadership, all the things that we see day to day out there. He was the exact right person for the job when they got him. It's if you believe in a higher calling, he certainly had it when he came here, because I don't think anybody else would have done what he did. And you're right. It's going to be interesting to have Nick Saban here for the Sugar Bowl and get a chance to ask him to kind of go back through that, because I know people locally want to find out why they ended up passing on him. Yeah,
it probably, I mean, again, blessing in disguise. I mean, because ultimately, Brees goes to Miami. This Saban stays there. You're probably seeing LSU with maybe 1 or 2 maybe national championships, at least maybe an SEC or 1 or 2 SEC championships, but it's glad that Brees is here. Sean, what's your take? You deal with him almost on a daily basis as well. This is a guy that obviously, when he came to San Diego, he was kind of just discarded. Through his whole career, he's kind of been a guy that's been kind of second-guessed as not being good enough.
Well, it's funny. He talked about his high school days yesterday. He was that conversation was brought up, and he said, it wasn't until midway through the playoffs, I guess it would have been his senior year, is when he just got started to get recruited. This is a guy that's going to be an NFL Hall of Famer, just getting recruited and during his senior year during the playoffs. So
in Texas,
in a great state of Texas,
North Dakota.
Exactly. And I was watching that game, and you saw the second quarter eruption, explosion. And we've seen it time and time again. These teams have 8 years of tape on Drew Brees, and they still can't figure it out. And I just kept thinking to myself, it is not this easy. He just makes it look this way, how effortless it is, or he makes it seem. And it's going to really be a sad. I think we've all been guilty at one point or another of kind of taking him for granted.
Yes.
When he doesn't have a 400-yard, 4-touchdown performance. I think we've all been guilty of that. But it's going to be a sad day in the city of New Orleans when he finally has to hang it up, because I don't know that you could find a more just a better just ambassador for the Saints city, given when he came. I mean, he was the perfect guy, perfect situation, and near perfect results as we've seen on the field.
Boy, talk about unappreciated. His number one target, Marcus Colston, what is it now? 8,000 yards, the 87th player in NFL history to do that, the first player in Saints history, a guy that's never been to a Pro Bowl. Sean, why don't you pick it up first? Talk about Marcus Colston and what he's been for this team as well.
I am so glad you asked this question, because Drew Brees said after the game, he goes, if you stack up his numbers over his career against others, he would be pretty consistent. So I went back and did that. First off, it was hard to find a decent sample size of receivers over the last 8 years that have been as consistent as he has been. I found a couple: Andre Johnson, Steve Smith, Larry Fitzgerald, Anquan Bolden. I believe that was 4, maybe 1 or 2 more in there. But he has more 1,000-yard seasons than Larry Fitzgerald. He has more touchdowns than Steve Smith. He has more receptions than Larry Fitzgerald during that time frame. More receptions than Andre Johnson during that time frame. Those guys have all been to Pro Bowls. They've all been all pros. You can make a case at some point in their career they'll be Hall of Famers. Marcus Colston hasn't even been to a Pro Bowl yet.
Amazing.
I mean, and you talk about a guy that just goes on about his business. I mean, you talk about the tape. 8 years of the tape of that play where I believe it was the first touchdown he scored, that up the seam, go up and get it. Drew Brees puts it up. I mean, a team has 8 years to study, 8 years of tape to study for that. They can't figure it out. Marcus Colston, when you talk about Drew Brees maybe being the best free agent pickup maybe ever, given what you got from Marcus Colston, when you picked him, that might be the best draft pick in Saints history, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the other thing I think about with Colston, other than how humble he is, we have to deal with him all the time. He doesn't like to talk to the media, which is rare for a receiver. Usually the diva position is the receiver position in the NFL. But the thing I think that is underappreciated is just how tough he is. The Saints run a lot of these all-go patterns down the seams, like you talked about, Sean. He takes some major hits. I mean, I know he's been concussed numerous times. He very rarely comes out of the game. He very rarely misses games. I know he broke his wrist at one point or broke a finger a few years ago. But other than that, he's out there every week. He's very durable, and I think that's underappreciated about him.
Yeah, I would agree. The Saints lose to the Seahawks. A lot of people wrote them off immediately after that loss, but they rebound and they play against a pretty similar Carolina team, physical, maybe not as quick, maybe not as good of a secondary, but a pretty good front seven, and they get a big win. And of course, it's at home. Let's start with the receivers first. Receivers have been really knocked for not being able to get off the jam in this timing offense. They weren't able to do it against a very good Seahawks secondary, but after the first quarter against the Carolina Panthers, they seemed to get it all together. Jeff, I'll take you first. Talk about the receiving core and how they have done this season and what's in front of them in terms of teams trying to be copycats to what the Seahawks had done to kind of slow them down.
Well, Sean Payton talked about it last week. It's not just the Saints. This is kind of becoming prevalent around the NFL. This is what you have to do, and you got to get physical at the line of scrimmage, reroute people, especially the Saints, because no one's going to play the Saints very often zone, because Drew Brees is so good against the zone. He picks it apart. We've seen it time and time again. So most people, their strategy is, hey, let's try and man up on them. Right now, the receivers, they don't have a dominant receiver, and so I think that's going to be the pattern from now on. Obviously, those guys got challenged after the Seattle game. I think they got challenged at receiver, and I think the offensive line got challenged because they responded with their best game of the year. But I'm not sure that that's going to make much of a difference when you go on the road again. Yeah. To me, the disparity between the Saints at home and on the road is the greatest in the NFL, how they play. And I think a lot of it has to do, Trent Dilfer alluded to that this week, and I thought it was interesting. Something I'm actually writing about is their kill system offense, where they rely on Drew at the line of scrimmage to get them out of a bad play into a good play, works wonders in the Superdome where everybody's on their best behavior.
You can hear pin drop
But
there.
when they go on the road, it has all kinds of problems, and they've got to get that fixed before they go into the playoffs.
Yeah, it's funny how big of a story that's become this year. Even during their 2009 run to the Super Bowl, 2011, I don't recall it being their home versus road disparity being such a big story. It's become the story when you talk about the Saints, especially on a national level. What happened in Seattle, to me, I thought even before the opening kickoff, the Saints had lost that game because you went. I don't know if you were at the conference call afterwards, after the Carolina game, and how much Coach Payton talked about the home field advantage, how much he wanted to make it more, he wanted to get it better at the Superdome, because when he went to Seattle, clearly something impacted him because he doesn't get into that sort of thing. And all of a sudden, he had workers there till 2:30 in the morning Friday before the game, putting those white, I don't know if they were shirts or jerseys, whatever they were on the seats. But it was almost like something happened in Seattle where it was shell-shocked, intimidation, whatever the case may be, because clearly that was not the Saints. In regards to the wide receivers, however, look, you saw the difference in personnel. I mean, Seattle has a great secondary, and that's without one of their guys, or two of their guys.
Yes.
And Carolina, that is the weak part of that defense, home versus road. And I'll say this, you were in Seattle, I was in Seattle. When that crowd gets going, that defense, they thrive off of it. I mean, there was one point in the timeout where you see the entire Seattle defense dancing while a crowd is going crazy. I mean, they really thrive and get into it. And it's a hostile environment, and the Saints were not able to do that. At home, they were able to overcome that. They didn't have to run the ball against Carolina. They threw the ball all over the yard. That was where the best matchup was. But I think, back to your original point, the Saints are going to have to, the wide receivers, if they have to go back to Seattle, I was trying to rack my brain matchup-wise, if they ever have to go back again, it's going to boil down to that. They have got to be able to kind of find their alpha male and get off the jam and really and beat them at their own game.
Guys, is it a byproduct of an aging receiving core at this point? I mean, you do have some young players in there. Tuna's really not done much yet, but Stills is coming along. You've got Jimmy Graham, who, again, is still kind of a pup, but you look at Lance Moore, you look at Colson, they've been around for a while. Is it the fact that maybe these guys are aging and slowing down, or is it that the fact that in this game today, officials are allowing defensive backs to get a little bit more physical receivers at the line of scrimmage, and maybe in some cases, as we saw against Seattle, within the route itself?
I think it's a little bit of all of those things, all those factors, and I also think the emergence of Jimmy Graham, who is the alpha male in their attack. They're wanting to get the ball to him as often as they can. He's a matchup nightmare. And I really believe Breeze, for the most part, takes what the defense gives him. And lots of times, if they're taking those receivers away, he's just going to go to the check down route to the running backs, which he's done a lot of. The Saints' three leading receivers are tight end and two running backs.
Yes.
And so they're not getting the ball, but they're still moving the ball. And they're still among the top offenses in the league, so it's not like they're hurting. But when they get in this game against Seattle, and Sean, you made a really good point. I mean, they match up very well with the Saints. I'm not sure that's the matchup that the Saints are ever going to win. They need to hope for San Francisco to beat them, I think, or somebody to knock them off, because I'm not sure that's a team they can beat out there.
And I'll throw something else out there. That game to Seattle was the 2009 game against the Patriots to the Saints. I mean,
great comparison.
If you watched what they did, there was a couple plays where clearly they had game tape. They had the bye week going in. They game filmed the screen and check down play. I mean, every single thing the Saints tried that day, Seahawks had an answer for it. Not to mention the fact that they just match up well. But when they try to set up the screen, boom, they were there. Try to get Jimmy Graham off the line. He was covered. It was just everything they tried to do. The Saints tried to do. Seattle had an answer. The crowd, I mean, they left no stone unturned. I just recall the 2009 game where Peyton just went all in with his game plan. It felt like Seattle did the same thing. So we'll see if they had the rematch again, if it would be that perfect of a game for Seattle. But I do think, matchup-wise, it's just a tough matchup for the Saints.
And the other thing, in that stadium, and you were there, they stand the entire game. And they don't, it's not just third down where they're getting up. They're up on first and second. They affect the game on all three downs. It's not just the third down like we see in the Superdome a lot. And I think that's important. I think that's what Sean Payton was getting at. He saw what happened out there. I mean, the first play of the game, the Saints made a line check, and somebody couldn't hear it, and the guy breaks three and drops Pierre Thomas for a 4-yard loss.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the crowd control, right? I mean, the crowd noise right there.
Well, and again, interesting when you look back at that game, and then you look at Peyton trying to maybe entice the crowd to get louder. Bringing in Guinness, talking about the possibility of trying to break the indoor record. You're in a situation where, when you start looking at where the Saints were, I mean, after that 21 unanswered points, the crowd just kind of went dormant. I mean, it wasn't as loud as maybe you would have thought it would have been going forward. I don't think that's a big problem once you get into the second season. The crowd's going to be fired up. But it'll be interesting to see, again, how this team reacts on the road, because they're now in a prove-it-to-me mode, as you mentioned, Sean, to the rest of the nation, that they can play outdoors, they can play outside the confines of the Dome, as well as they play in the Dome.
Yeah, I mean, and as I said, I don't ever recall it being such a big story nationally. But when you think Saints right now, you hear all these guys, Trent Dilfer, Dungy, any of these guys, pick a national analyst, and they say, you know what, I like them at home. On the road, not so much. Look, I thought the Seattle game was an opportunity to kind of erase that. It only enhanced that. So, look, they have what, 2 more road games the rest of this year. They can do their best to kind of help themselves with that. But you get that 2 seed, you get that first round bye, you get that second round host, and maybe you catch a break and get yourself an NFC Championship host if you get lucky with an opponent.
Well, here's another thing. I think even the fans feel that way. I mean, they see these games, even though the Saints are winning some of these road games at Atlanta, at Tampa Bay. They're not playing nearly as dominant football as they play at home. I mean, you see it. They could easily lost both those games.
Agreed.
So I think that's what's creeping in right now is everybody's seeing that they're – I just had a stat this week. They've failed to score more than 2 touchdowns in their last 3 road games. The Jets, Atlanta, and Seattle, they scored 3 in 1 quarter against the best defense in the league.
Yes.
So the disparity is it's we're not imagining this.
Yeah, no, it really is. And on the flip side, that's how good it is. In the dome. I mean, this was not the Miami Dolphins, back in week 4. This was not the Dallas Cowboys with every injury in the book on the defense. This was the number 1 scoring defense, the number 2 total defense, the number 6 passing defense, number 2 rushing defense in the NFL, and had just won 8 straight games that they just literally, by halftime that game was over. I mean, so on the flip side, you see what happens at home. So it's a little bit of give and take.
Yep, no doubt. 504-866-3200. That's 504-866-3200. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. We always welcome your comments or questions to the program. I have a great panel tonight. Jeff Duncan, columnist for the New Orleans Times-Picayune and NOLA.com, and Sean Fazende, anchor and also reporter for Fox 8 Sports. The offensive line was slighted early in the season. I can remember talking to both you guys, talking about that they need time to gel. They look as though they are starting to gel now. Again, a very physical defense in Carolina at home, no doubt about that helped, but they look like they've kind of turned the corner. Am I seeing this correctly, guys, or is this just something that because they were playing well at home, that they're looking a lot better? They seem to be protecting Drew Brees.
Well, they certainly had their best performance of the year against the Panthers. There's no question about that. But again, I think they've been inconsistent. I think they got dominated to some degree out in Seattle. So if they're going to have to match up with these physical fronts of San Francisco or Seattle in the playoffs, and this week I think will be an interesting week because this is a very good front, and we all know what Charles Brown how he got indoctrinated in the league a couple of years ago against Chris Long. I think Charles Brown, when people peel back the onion on him, you really start looking at he's struggled at times this year. I mean, he's had 10 penalties, 6 holding calls, allowed 6 sacks. It's going to happen in the NFL, but he's been a little bit of a drop-off. You have a little bit of a drop-off in Ben Grubbs' play. Yes. It's all these guys just a little bit worse, and so it collectively adds up to not as good a performance.
Well, I think they played better. I really do. To me, it happened in the Dallas game. I watched that Dallas game, and look, it was, that was a banged-up defense, no doubt. But if you watch Jari Evans in that game in particular, he looked like the Jari Evans of old. And Zach Strief has really quietly had a very good year. If you check the Pro Football Focus stats, he's always high up there with right tackles. And I think you're dead on when you talk about Charles Brown and Ben Grubbs. I think that's kind of been the iffy spot. And when you watch them run, they almost always run behind Jari Evans and the De La Puente or behind Zach Strief. They've played better, but look, you can't erase the Seattle game. And it was a hostile environment. Yes. They did not play well. So they've improved, but they still have a lot to prove.
Looking forward to the draft down the line, is that a position you think they will address along that offensive line? Is that a need as you look forward to next season?
Well, there's no question. I mean, they've got 3 of these guys that aren't even under contract next year, 3 of the starters. So they've got to get those guys locked up. They're projected to be way over the cap. They've got to get Jimmy Graham under contract. They've got some other key guys, Malcolm Jenkins. They've got a lot of work to do this offseason.
You talk about a free agent class this year. It is going to be a exceptional free agent class for the Saints. They have a lot of work to do. 3 out of the 5 starters, and you can make a case for either one. Do you keep them? Do you bring them back? So yeah, I think they do develop through the draft. I've been a little bit disappointed. Not a little disappointed. A lot disappointed. Teron Armstead hasn't been able to really work himself into the mix because I think they had high hopes for him. But they drafted him last year. But I don't think you go into the future thinking, okay, we got our tackle of the future. I think they do address this in the draft coming up.
Well, Rob Ryan has just embraced our culture. You live uptown. He's hitting all the watering holes from Monkey Hill to.
I wouldn't know that, Eric. I wouldn't know that.
But I got to tell you right now, guys, it's amazing. how he was run out of Dallas on a rail. Dallas obviously is suffering through maybe their worst defensive season in their history. And he comes here in New Orleans and again puts in a familiar scheme. The players buy into it. And all of a sudden, these guys are playing lights out. Now, look, let's face it. It's a younger team than we thought we were going to see going in. A lot of those veterans they thought they were counting on are gone. But they've been able to overcome injuries at almost every position on that defense. And he's been able to, obviously, not only just do a great job in scheming against teams, but adjusting on the fly. Guys, give me your take on Rob Ryan.
I think he's been, I mean, we were hoping middle of the pack defense. This is a top 5 defense in a lot of areas. You look at that defensive line, and I think we should add Bill Johnson's name in there as well, because he's an excellent defensive line coach. These young guns that are playing, Junior Gillette, Cam Jordan, Akeem Hicks, all under the age of 25 or at 25 years old. You talk about a defense that's overcome injuries, as you said. Malcolm Jenkins is having his best year of his career. Add in a guy like Kenny Vaccaro, the back end. You know, I was worried at first after the first game of Jabari Greer's injury. I thought maybe that could be the one injury that they can't overcome. But after that Atlanta game, Corey White has played pretty well. So what else can you say? This is not what we were expecting, and this is one of those unintended consequences, and it was a good one.
Yeah, it was.
And you have to give Sean Payton credit. He pulled a little Jean Lafitte going out and stealing him away from St. Louis.
I
mean, that's a storyline this week. But I mean,
really was,
he lured him out of there after
Yeah.
he'd already basically been in St. Louis, got him down here, and it's turned out nothing but spades for the Saints.
What's the difference, Jeff? What's the difference between what you saw in Greg Williams, what you saw last year with Spagnuolo, and what you see now with Rob Ryan?
Well, he reminds me a lot of Greg Williams. The schemes, how multiple they are. You know, we talked a lot about them going to a 3-4, but they're really it doesn't matter what base scheme they are in, because they're going to be in different alignments throughout the game. But the emergence of that defensive line that Sean talked about. I mean, you've got 3 really dominant young defensive linemen. Those guys are hard to find one of them.
Yes.
They've got 3, and I think Akeem Hicks has been overlooked. I mean, this guy is coming on week by week. He demands double teams almost every week, and he's freeing up those guys. It reminds me a lot. I was talking to Akeem Hicks yesterday. It reminds me a lot of that dominant defensive line they had in 2000 with Glover, Hand, Joe Johnson, and Darren Howard, where you couldn't double just one guy and take him out. I mean, if you double one guy, you're going to expose yourself to the other lineman. That's what they've got going on right now.
Well, and Jenkins and Hicks have allowed Gillette and also Jordan to be able to rush the passer, be as prolific as they've been. They're overlooked. I mean, this last week against Cam Newton, I mean, you look at how they were able to contain Newton. A lot of that was, if you go back and you look at the tape, how well they did on the interior of the defensive line.
They really did. And just back to your original point, it's personality meets talent, meets scheme, meets really just overall youth. I mean, all those 4 things are working in their favor. So you have this perfect storm of what you see right here. And, you know, I just think they enjoy playing for Rob Ryan. He's a fun guy. We deal with the media. He's just as fun to deal with as Greg Williams was. I mean, he's hilarious. And, you know, he's got that very distinct look. I mean, he is New Orleans. I mean, he's not from here, has no connection before this year, but, I mean, he fits right in.
Right. No, there's no doubt. He may not be New Orleans born, but he's definitely New Orleans certified by now. There's no doubt about that. Is it the fact that he is allowing players to get involved in the game plan? We've heard over and over again that this was something he's done at every stop, that he sits down with the players, he allows them to give their opinions, to be able to formulate their game plan. Is that something that's happening here now?
Well, you know, I think that's a big part of it. The players bought in. They never really bought into Steve Spagnuolo. Yes. And I don't think they were nearly as bad as they played a year ago. That's obvious now. That's almost an outlier of a season. But they lost their confidence and they lost their buy-in factor, and that's a huge part of it. I think there's a lot of things you could run scheme-wise that this defense would play well in, as long as they buy into whatever it is, and they clearly bought into Rob Ryan.
There's no doubt. I mean, look, when they feel empowered, they're able to have a normal conversation with their coordinator. He's not talking down to them. He can have a free-flowing conversation. He gives them all animal nicknames. So yeah, I mean, I think that it just for whatever reason it works with this group, this young, energetic, eager to prove group. I mean, there's not I saw a tweet today. I don't know if it was one of your guys or someone else, but it might have been Triplet. It said, you know, there wasn't a player more excited and happy to be in the NFL than Junior Gillette, and then he's proven himself, and he kind of came up the hard way. But and then when you have a guy like that wants to win at all costs or succeed at all costs, and you get what you have right now with the Saints defense.
And you make a really good point. And Rob Ryan, I think, came here to try and win a Super Bowl, and also to become a head coach. It was a smart move on his part. It's the same reason Greg Williams wanted to coach here.
Yes.
You're a defensive coach with Drew Brees in that offense. You don't have to be lights out, but they've been even better than that.
Boy, they have. You know what's interesting? You listen to San Francisco, you listen to Carolina after the games against the Saints. Both teams, players on those teams, have had disparaging remarks about the Saints. They believe that they get a rematch with this team, they'll beat this team. It's something that I don't think we're used to down here in New Orleans, the lack of respect for this team this season. Guys, are you hearing that when you're in locker rooms? Are you getting the same vibe as a lot of people get when they read these quotes, when they hear these comments that are coming from those cities?
No, I don't feel that way. I mean, I think maybe one or two guys is shooting off at the lip, but I don't feel like the other teams disrespect the Saints at all. I think they respect them in the dome a lot more than they respect them outside the dome, and I think that's what a lot of these guys are getting at. And I feel like the 49ers have always felt like they have their number. I think they felt like, even though they kind of got dominated in that game in the dome,
No, they really did.
They still felt like they had control of that game, and I know that's a matchup I don't think Seattle wants or the Saints want. You don't want to have to play San Francisco again because they are not intimidated by any of these opponents.
I don't know. Look, when you go in with a vision of a team like San Francisco is a physical brand of football, and they think the Saints have a finesse team, and quite frankly, the Saints out-physical them. They beat them at their own game, and it kind of caught them off guard. So maybe they feel like they weren't quite as prepared for that style. Oh, we'll get them again. We'll get her another shot, and it kind of dismissed that victory. I don't feel it as at least they're not telling us in the locker room that they feel disrespected by anything like that. They just kind of blow it off on to the next one. As long as they're 10-3, it really doesn't matter. But I am a little bit surprised of how easily some of these teams are able to kind of, okay, well, if we get them again, we got this.
Yeah.
Like it's going to be that easy.
Like it's going to be that easy.
Right.
And that was really what I was getting to, because it's just. Since the Peyton era, it's unfamiliar territory. We've never heard that from opposing teams. You get a lot of respect from opposing teams at the Saints play and win or lose. And we've heard that at least a couple times. And I agree with you guys. There's no guarantee that Seattle's in the NFC Championship, especially if they got to take on a Carolina or a San Francisco team, even in Seattle, because those teams match up against Seattle.
Yeah, and they're going to play these low-scoring defensive ball games where one break here or there all of a sudden changes the circumstances, and you're playing from behind. The pressure starts mounting on you. It's almost like an NCAA basketball tournament game where all of a sudden you start feeling the pressure. And that's the reason why we've only had, once in the last decade that both number one seeds make it, and that was the Saints Colts.
Yes.
So somebody's going to fall along the way.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's why get yourself that 2 seed, get yourself in there, take care of business on the way out here on the back end of the season, and host that playoff game, and maybe you catch a break. And look, there's no guarantees, and like you said, San Francisco already beat Seattle, and of course Carolina is a little like Seattle in that regard, and not as good in the secondary, but anything can happen once you get in the playoffs.
504-866-3200. Let's head to the phone line. Patrick is in New Orleans East. Patrick, welcome. You're on Inside New Orleans Sports. Patrick, are you with us?
Two observations about Sunday's game, particularly on defense. One, which I totally agree upon, the defensive call. Secondly, the one that I disagree with, and hopefully we don't ever try it again. My disagreement would be the three-man rush late in the ball game when we had 4th and goal, I believe, from the 16 or the 17. I think the longer that we allow Cam to move around, certainly there was very little that we can do to deter the wide outs and the receivers downfield. Hopefully we get away from that three-man rush. The second, and I think most important observation I had about Sunday's game is that when offensive lines up with our defense, particularly near the goal line, with two wideouts in the past, I've noticed that when they run crossing routes, we attempt to play man-to-man, which almost creates a natural separation for our defenders. On one play, particularly late in the ball game, Carolina lined up two guys on the outside. We went to a zone. Kenny Vaccaro pretty much took off Steve Smith's head, and Keenan Lewis had pretty good coverage on the outside guy. Hopefully we will stay with that type of defense, particularly near the goal line. I'll hang up and listen to your comments.
Patrick, thank you for the phone call. Guys?
Well, it's hard to argue with the success of the Saints' red zone defense right now. I understand his point about the three-man rush, but that was 4th and long. Sometimes you can drop 8 and one more guy or two more guys or three more guys than they have to run routes. And I know what he's talking about on that play. He's talking about kind of switching and, have your zone. Look, it's working. And you saw the front end of that game could have gotten a lot worse had it not been for the Saints' red zone defense. So whatever you're doing, just keep doing it. I mean, especially inside the dome.
Yeah, and I really feel like Rob Ryan's just going to mix things up. So he's not going to stick in a three-man rush, but he's also not going to stick in an all-out blitz like Greg Williams would sometimes get caught up in. And Sean Payton brought this up to us this week about he's the one that called that all-out blitz against Seattle, which surprised me. The one that Russell Wilson hit the long pass on to I think it was Golden Tate. That was a Sean Payton call, overruling his coordinator or suggesting it.
Yes,
and there they all blitzed and got burned for a 50-yard play. So
they did. St. Louis, they've had some problems in St. Louis in the past, especially under the Payton era. This is a different team on both ends. Tough front seven for St. Louis, a team that can run the football, really can run the football with multiple backs. Guys, how do you see this game? What are the keys to victory for this game on Sunday?
Well, they can't give them anything easy. I mean, for whatever reason, the Saints seem to have one play here or there on the road where they make a turnover or something. They can't let them get any hope, I think. There's a huge disparity in the quarterbacks of these two teams. We saw Seattle go into St. Louis and really struggle earlier this year. But still, it came down to a play where the quarterback needed to make a play for St. Louis, and he couldn't even get him in the end zone down the 1-yard line. I think the Saints take care of business. I don't sense any overlooking this opponent at all. I don't think Sean Payton will allow it.
And that's what happened the last two times. Let's be honest. I mean, it wasn't the venue. I mean, that's Cardinals country right there in the Midwest. That's not. It wasn't the venue. It's an indoor facility that they're not going to have any elements to deal with. Fast track. Be the Saints, and they're not going to overlook them this time around. They did that the last two times. In 2011, am I right? Was it A.J. Feely quarterback in that day? I don't even think it was Bradford. I think it was a backup
Bradford
that
was
day.
out.
Yeah, and then, of course, got the backup again this time around. Just be the Saints. You're a better team. You don't have to be dominant. You just have to be convincing. Go out on the road and win the game.
And play better on special teams. They've had some leaky special teams lately, and that would be one area of concern. I know it is for Sean Payton. I mean, Tavon Austin is a dynamic return man. You get a big return, all of a sudden, get a little momentum, things start, snowballing on you.
Hang in there, guys. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. We've got a great panel for you tonight. Jeff Duncan, the New Orleans Times-Picayune, Sean Fazende of Fox 8 Sports. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll talk a little Pelicans, LSU, and Tulane. Of course, your calls are always welcome at 504-866-3200. Stay tuned.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by the Union Capital Corporation and Natel's Air Conditioning and Heating, a proud sponsor of the St. Jude Dream Home.
My life is full of statistics. Thing is, I could have dropped out of school and become one myself, but I didn't because I had people that believed in me. Here's another statistic. 7,000 students drop out every school day. That's one every 26 seconds. It's time that students know that we believe in them.
Inspire a student and share your message of support at boostup.org.
You're watching WLAE, New Orleans Public Television. Find us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
Welcome back. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports each and every Thursday night here on WLAE, 6 o'clock, with a rebroadcast each and every Friday night at 10 p.m. Our guest tonight, Jeff Duncan, the New Orleans Times-Picayune, and Sean Fazende of Fox 8 Sports. I'm Eric Asher. I'm your host. We'll switch gears in just a moment. We'll talk a bit about the New Orleans Pelicans. Of course, you can always join us at 504-866-3200. And guys, the Pelicans are at 500. Had a big win last night against Detroit in overtime. Anthony Davis is out. They're in a situation now where I guess they're kind of treading water here because they got a tough road swing that's coming up right now. Jeff, we'll take you first. Your thoughts on where this team is right now, 20 games into the season?
They're about where I think we all thought they would be. They're fighting, I think, to get into the playoffs down the road. I mean, they're going to be a team that if things fall their way, maybe they get the 8 seed. I don't see. I think they're going to be on the outside looking in. They're still trying to identify roles. We're starting to see that come together a little more on the court. With it, now they've gotten Tyreek Evans back healthy. It hurts to not have Anthony Davis. Obviously, he was a emerging dominant star in this league,
Yes.
and that's a huge setback. I don't know how they can overcome that. They've had some good wins. They're playing a lot better lately, but when they go on the road, it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, West Coast road trip coming up here. 10-10, 20 games, consistently inconsistent. To me, that's about where I thought they'd be early in the season. A significant amount of new faces in that starting lineup. Starting to figure each other out a little bit. You're starting to see it a little bit. Not quite there yet identity-wise. Not having Anthony Davis hurts because he is a superstar. He's a superstar coming along. And 20 games in, 10-10, I think you can take it. I think battling for a playoff spot in March, don't make it an irrelevant March. March and April has to be relevant to where you're at least battling. And to me, I think that's fair expectation for this team.
Well,
right
Jeff,
now.
it does have to be relevant because of the way this front office, and I'm talking about the front office, I'm talking about the hierarchy. With Benson and looking at these two franchises, seeing the success that they've had with the Saints, they're looking for immediate success out of this franchise, at least vying for that playoff spot, if not getting into the playoffs this year, aren't they?
Well, let's face it, the clock's ticking. Tom Benson is in his mid-80s. And he's in great health, and I don't want to say anything more than that. But I think he's a guy that made this purchase, I think, for all the right reasons to keep the team home. He wants part of his legacy to be that this team is successful. There's no question about that. And the moves I think this past offseason portended what we're seeing now. They made those moves to win now. They brought in a lot of veteran players to where they're young, but they're veteran guys. They made moves, I think, to try and win right away. And the thing I had question about the Pelicans right now is when I watch them, I don't know what you hang your hat on with them. I don't know what do they do well. What can you say? This is like you see the Saints. They're passing offense, but you don't see much of that with the Pelicans, and I'm still waiting on that.
If I could put my finger on one thing, they're a pretty good outside shooting team. But they're a team of guards and forwards, and that's the problem right now. They really lack that rim protector, especially with Davis out. And you're looking at a situation where now they're trying to mesh. Sean, is there a mentality right now where they've got to win? They've got to be in the playoffs this season?
From everything I've been able to gather, and again, I'm more in Saints mode right now.
Yes.
It's a realistic approach to this. They want to see significant improvement, but they're not expecting an NBA title right now. Battling for a playoff spot, possibly getting that 8th seed, would satisfy management. You can't regress, though. Look, Dell Demps is on year number 3. Year number 4. This is all his roster. Same for Monty Williams. Look, they don't have an infinite amount of time here to just get this thing right. They have to show significant improvement. And I think battling for an 8th seed, to me, or to them, would be a significant improvement.
But can the case be made that with new management, going through everything that Demps and Williams have had to go through to rebuild this roster, Shin obviously cash poor, NBA buying the franchise, nixing the original deal that Dell Demps wanted to make for Chris Paul, getting lucky in the lottery, now in a situation where you've kind of put together a whole new team, do they merit an opportunity to kind of see this through?
I think they're getting it, and I think right now, like you said, you got to show improvement and growth, and I think that's why I say realistic expectation is to show improvement, because everybody's got to show improvement. We're all accountable for our jobs, so you have to, especially as competitive as the NBA is. I would say, look, you got to show growth. If you regress, I think at this point you're probably on the back end of those but excuses. I think now you're probably at the point where this is your roster. Do something with it.
Right.
And for every positive move they've made, it seems like there's another one you could question. And I feel like they've really been rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic here for a few years, changing the core over and over. I think they need to settle in now on this core and see what it can do. They've been making all these changes for 2 or 3 years. Vasquez comes in, Vasquez leaves. Lopez comes in. They're making all these trades, and I'm not sure where they're getting. So let's see how this core develops. I'm not ready to pull the trigger on them yet.
Well, and again, you're in a situation now where as the trade deadline comes up, you may be having to look to make another move here, depending on what's going to happen in the middle. I realize it's not a league of centers, but you have to be able to protect the rim. Now, they did a nice job last night against Detroit. a team with Twin Towers. I'm surprised that Detroit did not go at them on the inside. They really played outside in instead of inside out. But you're going to go against some teams, obviously, that will go inside, that will challenge their lack of big men, and it's something they're going to have to figure out. Guys, do you think that this is the roster for the rest of the season, or as we get closer to the trade deadline, they may be able to make some moves?
I would. With Dell Demps, there's always a possibility.
Good
point.
Point.
There really is. I would think the core of this roster is set now. If they can somehow get a center for an Eric Gordon or something like that, maybe you would say, okay, let's make that deal. There can't be a midseason 5-player deal. I mean, this is their core right here. I could see it if it helps their team to shed a couple pieces or draft picks, whatever you have, whatever the case may be, but not another roster overhaul here.
Right, and I think the two linchpins to build going forward are going to be Holiday at point guard and Anthony Davis.
Yes.
I mean, other than that, they need to keep those two intact. They're two of the hardest positions.
How about
to
Ryan
have.
Anderson?
And Anderson, I think, but he's
Yeah.
a complementary piece in that puzzle. But those two guys have to stay here, and they have to build around them. Anything else, I think they could move.
Right. You know, it's interesting about Ryan Anderson, what he's had to do lately. I mean, he is a prolific three-point shooter. There's no doubt about that. But again, when you got to go down low, when you got to defend guys that are bigger than you, when you've got to be a rim protector and you've also got to be a rebounder, it tends to hurt your outside shooting. We saw that a little bit last night in the Detroit game. You know, it wasn't until overtime where he kind of got hot because they're relying on him now to go inside and to play almost that center position when he's kind of a sharpshooter from the outside. We'll see how that affects his game over the long haul, especially if Davis doesn't come back within the 4-week window that they were talking about.
And I think that's it. I mean, I think you just figure you're just surviving, treading water, as you said, without Davis. You know, Anderson's being asked to do things he's not necessarily comfortable doing, but he did get hot, and he really was kind of the difference in the overtime game last night. So, look, without Anthony Davis, there's a lot of players doing more than they wouldn't have to do with him there. But I mean, it's an injury; you got to deal with it.
I mean, they may have to try to outscore people to win games now because they are an offensive-minded team, especially without Davis. But we all know, I mean, there's going to be nights when your shot's not falling. That's why people say you win with defense, because that can always consistently be there. And I don't think they've got anybody on their team now with Davis out that's a dominant stopper. I think they're going to really struggle to stop people. The
big national story this week has been Nick Saban. Is he staying in Alabama? Is he going to Texas? We've heard a myriad of stories out there from 10 years, $100 million, having his debt paid off. He's already got a house in Austin. At this point, he's told his quarterback that he's not leaving Alabama. Guys, can you make heads or tails on where Nick Saban? We know that tomorrow, Mac Brown and also the president of Texas will be meeting, I believe, with the Board of Regents. The president of Texas has stood behind Mac Brown. Guys, give me your thoughts on Nick Saban. Sean, we'll take you first.
Well, I don't know that I've ever seen. Well, I guess we have seen, but there's a lot of big name, credible people that are sharply divided on this as far as what Nick Saban is going to do. It seems like Mac Brown is not going to be the head coach next year. We're not in Austin. We don't know. We don't know what's going on in Mac Brown's head. The question is whether or not Nick Saban is the guy that goes. Now, he should have the track record of leaving from LSU to Miami to Alabama. Look, he has not come out. He hasn't. There was a report out that he has not signed that extension yet. So until that gets done, even if it does get done, you never know until he's back with Alabama next year. My question would be, if you're a recruit right now, what are you doing?
Yes.
You're committed to Texas, you're committed to Alabama. What do you do at this point? This is a pivotal point in the recruiting period. So, look, it could go either way. With Nick Saban, anything is possible. He's not come out and said, I am going to be the Alabama head coach next year. He has not come out and expressed interest, whatever the case may be. So I guess stay tuned. We shall see with Nick Saban.
I think the Tiger Athletic Foundation would like to pay some of his salary to go to Texas, right? I mean, there'll be a party.
They'll pay off some of that debt, right?
There'll be a big crawfish boil in Baton Rouge if he does go. But there's a reason he's holding out. Obviously, he's got a great agent, Jimmy Sexton. They're going to leverage this for all they can. Whether he leaves or not, I don't think anybody really knows. I caution everybody to beware what you hear this time of year report-wise. I can still remember to this day covering the Saints when Mike Riley supposedly was rumored. He interviewed for the Alabama job, and I had reporters calling me from Alabama saying there were reports that a helicopter had landed with him on the field in Tuscaloosa and I was staring at him on the Saints practice field. So things, there's a lot of crazy reports that go on these days.
Can you guys give me your gut feeling? My gut feeling is he goes to Texas. Now, I may be 100% wrong, and next week I'm sitting here going, he re-signed with Alabama. But what's your gut?
I think he's going to go. I think there's a part of him that would like to, climb another mountain, and this is the pinnacle of college football. I think Texas, the resources there we were talking about off air are as good as you get, and all the things they're throwing at him. I think there's a part of him would say, hey, I could win 3 national championships at 3 different schools, and his legacy would be cemented.
And you don't have to go through the SEC West to get there.
Right. No question about it. I mean, now that's just a gut feeling. Whether he goes or not, who knows with Nick Saban. I don't think any of us could say with
Sean,
certainty.
You covered him in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, oh my gosh. I don't miss it either. I'm slightly leaning towards him leaving just because of what he's already accomplished at Alabama, and that he's losing his quarterback. Not much more he can accomplish there in Tuscaloosa. Texas is just, right now, I mean, there's so many toys they have there to play with. They got the Longhorn Network. They got the best high school football in the country. It's the biggest, it's the flagship university for the state of Texas. It is college football, and I can see him wanting to go in, that prestigious of a place, fix it up, have it be all him again. And riding off in the sunset as national champion of the Texas Longhorns. So right now I'm slightly leaning towards him leaving and going to Texas, but it could go either way.
Well, I'll tell you made a great point. When you look at the recruits that are out there, they're kind of hanging in the wind right now. Guys that were leans toward LSU, but ultimately went to Alabama because of Nick Saban. How many coaches on that Tiger coaching staff now are looking at this going, making the phone call, he's going, we got a spot for you right here at LSU, and ultimately how this can really change the recruiting situation at all 3 schools.
Well, that's probably was already a big part of their pitch to begin with. You're going to go to Alabama? Yeah, he's shown his track record. Now the follow-up call is, I told you so. Right. He look at it right now. He's going to go. He's going to go. So it could really change the landscape. And all those guys that went to Alabama or committed to Alabama, hey, Louisiana's still there. We still love you. Come on back to LSU.
And this is an unprecedented year for talent in Louisiana, and there's still a lot of top prospects, including Leonard Fournette, who's hanging out there waiting to see what happens. This could be a crazy January and February in recruiting.
Yep, no doubt. Tigers looking for their 10th victory of the season. Not what a lot of Tiger fans anticipated with this season, even with all the losses and the defections to the NFL. They take on Iowa in the Outback Bowl. Guys, do you sense the enthusiasm of the Tiger Nation on this upcoming bowl game, or is it kind of like, they're in a bowl?
Well, I think people are excited to see the young quarterback play. I think that's one thing that people, but otherwise, it's what's wrong with the bowl system.
Agreed.
If LSU had a chance there at the end to get a seed into a playoff, there's a lot more to play for, and they probably don't sleepwalk through an Arkansas game. That's the problem right now. These games all become like undercards. And who's motivated to play in this game? I don't know. I think Iowa is.
Especially if you are a team that aspires to be in that BCS championship game, and you're looked at as that a big part of your program. There's no doubt. We've seen this with other Tiger teams where if they don't make it to the championship, they really don't show up for the bowl game.
Yeah, and look, I don't sense the enthusiasm at all. I think Tiger faithful, Tiger team, state of Louisiana looks at this as a down year for LSU. And look, they're going to play an Iowa team. It doesn't scream sexy. It's not a big matchup. I agree with you with the Anthony Jennings thing because I caution everyone to just look. It was one drive. Yes. He did outstanding, but let's just watch and see. And this is a good kind of a feel for where he is. But I think overall it is a bit of a disappointing feel around Baton Rouge in Louisiana.
Well, you mentioned Anthony Jennings, and Miles said this week that he would not change his offensive scheme to be able to take advantage of the dual threat that Jennings is. It's interesting that he said that. Whether he means it or not, we won't know until the bowl game.
We'll see.
But again, you're looking at a guy that could do a lot of different things and a much better runner than what Mettenberger was. And you got a month to prepare now. You have the time to put in those plays or to expand his portfolio, so to speak, in terms of getting him out, getting him ready to go. Guys, what do you think? Do you think that we'll see a little bit maybe of a different offense with Jennings back there for this bowl game, maybe a precursor of what we'll see next year?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt.
Yeah.
I think he's probably snowing everybody a little bit on that. They've had that stuff in all year.
Yes.
Cam Cameron brought it in. So it's something that they, I think, wanted to work into the system earlier. But then Zach Mettenberger just had this great season, and I think they held off on it. But and Sean, I know you know this. I mean, they're very high on Jennings. They've been high on him all along. I mean, he beat out Rivers, who was a guy they also are high on. But Jennings surpassed him on the depth chart. I think it says a lot about Jennings. And so I think there is an element of, hey, let's see what this kid can do, and is the offense going to be a little different with it?
They'd be fools not to. I mean,
agree.
it's to their advantage to have a few new wrinkles in it. This is a brand new kid, true freshman coming out. They'd be foolish to have the same exact offense. So yes, you're going to see a few new wrinkles, but they're not going to let Jeremy Hill has not been taking handoffs from the shotgun all year long. They're not going to all of a sudden let him run the ball, out of the shotgun spread. But you will see some wrinkles. Probably see a little bit of both. What is it? 15 practices you get, bowl practices. So they'll have some time to work in a few packages. But I think at the end of the day, you'll see a little bit of both, old school, new school, and see what you get New Year's Day.
Jeff, comment on Mettenberger's season, and again, how much you think the ACL injury will hurt him in the upcoming draft.
Well, it's definitely going to, he's going to have to go under the knife, and he's going to have to prove to scouts that he can come back and play. I think it's devastating for him, timing-wise. But he had an incredible season. I mean, he was being talked about as a first-round draft pick. I know the Arizona Cardinals were at the Texas A&M game, had their general manager and one of their owners there, and I thought they were there to see Manziel, and I found out they were there to see Zach Mettenberger. That's how much they thought of him. So this is a guy who just blew up. He's got the arm. He's got all the physical skills to make every NFL throw. Can he be the leader and emerge as with all the intangibles that we see with Drew Brees? That kind of stuff that you need, I think, to go to the next level at the NFL. But he's going to get a shot.
I thought we saw that growth, though, this year.
Yeah,
I really did. I
too.
thought we saw that maturity.
Agree.
I talked to a few friends that work in Baton Rouge, and they all said it. I mean, where he was last year, even with dealing with the media, he was a little bit just kind of, he showed up did the Ron Burgundy thing, the home opener last year. Got rid of that this year. I'm the quarterback of LSU, big time. Look, I think he's got the strongest arm in all of football, not just college football. I think if you really go arm strength in NFL, he may have the strongest arm right now if he was on an NFL team. Wow. And he's got, and you saw the accuracy. I mean, some of those throws, this was not, I love Jameis Winston, but if you watch him throw the football, he's throwing the guys that are 10 yards wide open. I mean, he is threading the needle. Zach Mettenberger, I'm talking about. The Georgia game stands out. I thought he was the best player on the field in that game. So I think his season was outstanding. Outstanding tape for all those scouts to look at. What I'm concerned with, now you go into the pre-draft evaluation is brutal as it is. With an injury, you can't do. I mean, his pro day, he would have lit things up, being able to flash that arm strength. He's not going to be able to do any of that.
That's right.
So I think it's going to hurt his draft stock. And I think, let's say he slips because of that ACL injury, he's not going to be able to play to probably, September, October at the earliest. You would think, given the timing of the injury, was it December? So give or take a couple months there. But I think he can be a late round steal for a team at some point in the future. I don't think he could contribute right away with this injury being so late in his senior year.
The D has underachieved. The defense is underachieved. But because you saw so many young players playing this year, is this something that you believe that this defense will be an LSU type defense next year?
Yeah, I don't even know if I would agree that they've underachieved. I think this is about what I thought they would be. They struggled in some areas, but their secondary they needed to get fixed.
Yes.
And they brought in the freshmen and started playing those guys. They moved on, and I think this defense is going to have to carry the team next year. It's going to be the exact opposite of this year. The defense is going to be the strength until they can figure out who's going to be their playmakers next year, because they're going to lose probably both receivers or at least one of them. They're going to lose the quarterback. So they're going to have to build around that running game, and they may have a great running back coming in.
What about those two inside guys? You think that they'll ultimately go to the NFL draft?
I think they could use another year of good tape, honestly, quite frankly. You talk about Ferguson and Anthony Johnson.
Yes.
I think they should come back because I think they could use another year of good tape.
But will they?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Look, there's no guarantees here. You see, if you got a good, depending on who you talk to, if you think you can get in that top, couple rounds, and by all means go. I'm taking a little different approach though with the defense. I think a lot of their success next year and beyond is going to be this recruiting class.
This upcoming recruiting class.
If they can get some big-time guys to contribute right away, I think all of a sudden you're back in. Look, they got devastated with those guys leaving last year, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And I really feel like the year they lost the national championship. That recruiting class has not, their sophomores now has not really been up to par with some of the talent level that they've had in years past. This year, the talent is there. They can get these guys in, contribute right away, combined with the development of some of the guys they got in this year. I think you have they can get back to where they were defensively.
Boy, as down as maybe the LSU fans are on their program, that's as high as the Tulane fans are on their program. Bowl game, they've had a great season. Obviously, they've exceeded their expectations of their fan base at this point. Going to the New Orleans Bowl, taking on a pretty tough ULL team. Sean, I'll take you first. Your thoughts on this Tulane team and how quickly CJ has been able to turn things around.
Yeah, excellent job. I mean, look, all year this year, they've had to practice in different locations. They haven't been able to practice on campus like they normally would with the construction of the new stadium. He took that Sean Payton approach, just nothing bothers him, just shrugs it off and goes, where we got to go, let's figure out the logistics. Look, 7-5, I thought they'd have 4 wins this year, doubling last year's total. They got 7, surprised me. Didn't think they'd be in a bowl this year. Excellent job. And if you ask him, I think he probably feels like we left a few out on the field. Probably could have finished 9 or even 10 wins this year. So certainly the future looks bright, and I love this matchup for the New Orleans Bowl. Tulane versus ULL, 2 up-and-coming programs in the state of Louisiana. I love the fact that Louisiana college football is not just LSU anymore. It's all these surrounding teams and universities, and I love the fact that Tulane is 7-5 right now and playing in a bowl game.
And we knew that CJ was going to be able to recruit, but everybody thought it was going to take him a few years. But I think he expedited that process this past offseason when he got a lot of Division I transfers to come in, guys that could play right away, took advantage of that. Very smart move. He plugged some spots where he knew they were weak. And they've got to get back to, I think, building up that offensive line. That's always been the problem there. But the young quarterback they've got from Jesuit is the future there. Yes, and he's going to be the future there. That's a guy they're very high on. And I think they're just going to keep going up. It's only going to help the recruiting. They're going to Ullman Stadium next year. One of the things I'm interested to see in this bowl game is who's got the bigger crowd. Is it going to be ULL or Tulane? I think they're going to go way over 40,000.
I would tell you right now, ULL is going to travel.
They have before in this bowl game.
Oh, no doubt they have.
Won back-to-back.
Right, they have. So it'll be interesting to see how many alumni come in here and get involved in this bowl game. Is this a critical recruiting class for him? You've got success. You've got to keep it going. People are looking at Tulane now that never looked at Tulane. Recruits never looked at Tulane before. How critical is this class for CJ as he moves forward?
Yeah, I think it's huge, as in any recruiting class, but particularly one coming off a successful year. And once again, he said it when he was hired, state of New Orleans, kind of like the state of Miami when he was down in Miami. He's got guys, all the local programs committing, a lot of 3-star guys able to commit, 2- and 3-star guys able to commit to Tulane. I think it's a huge year, and he realizes right now the 2014 class in-state talent is huge, and he's kind of taking a bite out of that apple because I think it's the lifeline of your program. Any recruiting class has got to be huge for your future.
Jeff, your thoughts in about 30 seconds.
Well, they've got to upgrade. They're going to a better conference, so they're going to have to play. They have to get better players to compete at the next level. But I think they're very smart. They understand that LSU can't take everybody in this state. If they can start getting some of those guys, the second-level players, to come here, it'll be a lot like what we saw down in Florida for years. Well, maybe not that level, Miami, Florida State, Florida, but a little bit lower degree.
And this is a great game for them to showcase themselves to the nation. This is the first bowl game. A lot of people will be tuning into it. It's been an exciting bowl game in the past, and good things are happening for Tulane. I think we're all happy for CJ and the entire program. Guys, thanks so much for being with us tonight. Certainly appreciate your time, and as always, you did a great job in being part of the panel. I want to thank Jeff Duncan of the New Orleans Times-Picayune and NOLA.com, Sean Fazende of Fox 8 Sports. Also want to thank you so much for tuning in each and every Thursday to Inside New Orleans Sports. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night at 10 o'clock. Also, you can catch me on the radio weekdays. It's 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. on WGSO, 990 a.m. You can catch the rebroadcast of all of the previous shows on Inside New Orleans Sports on ericasher.com, as well as my podcast on ericasher.com as well. And also you can follow me on Twitter at Eric_Asher. I want to thank the WLAE production staff, also Donovan Joseph, Kenny Juno, my producer, William Hill, also Jim Dotson, as well as Ron Yeager. And I'd also like to congratulate Ron Yeager's son, Peter Yeager, who was named to the Academic Composite Football Team by the Louisiana Athletic Association for the 5A Division He has the highest GPA of any athlete in that classification. Is going to be honored tonight at the Dome. So congratulations to you, Peter. And New Orleans, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you right back here next week for Inside New Orleans Sports, 6 p.m. WLAE TV. Good night.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by the Union Capital Corporation and Natel's Air Conditioning and Heating, a proud sponsor of the St. Jude Dream Home.